Are you tired of those who constantly say, and including myself, right? The economy is doing based on the numbers so well. Why aren't the people giving Biden the credit necessary? Why are people saying they expect a whole lot? They have more faith that Donald Trump can do better with the economy. I'm going to tell you why. And, we talk about narrative a whole lot. And it is narrative. It is mostly narrative. And it's not only the narrative of what has happened, but the narrative on what has to occur and what you're working for. Donald Trump would like to, well, I tell you what, I want you to listen to this piece from this roundtable on MSNBC first and see how they talk about, hey, the economy is great. What's the problem? Well, Americans are feeling inflation. The mere fact that they're calling it inflation, that's what Americans feeling. It's part of the narrative problem. Listen to this and then we'll take it on the other side.
Andrew, we'll start with you. And just, is there something we're missing? The numbers all look really good. If you had to find a bad one, where would it be?
Well, let me say this, and I'm just listening to the conversation you're having, and this is not necessarily something that I agree with, meaning I think we have a great economy. I think that you look at this economy on all metrics, and it's very, very challenging to say it's a problem economy. The challenge, though, and the real challenge is, and I don't blame the president for this, but I think when it's on your watch, you get blamed for it, is even with inflation coming down, it went up. Prices are still a third higher than they were, 3 years ago. And so, even if you look at gas prices down and there's some food prices that are down and all that's great. And you can give the president credit for, undoing some of the supply chain problems from before and the like. But I think that the average American is looking and going, it just costs more than it used to. And even though my wages might be marginally higher than they used to be, because wages have gone up too, they say to themselves, the differential is that I'm still underwater on a relative basis. And I think life is relative. And I'm not saying that the president should get the blame for this, but I think that's what is happening. I think that's when you look at the numbers, I say it's follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. And that's where the money goes, for better or worse.
So, Christine, let's get to your take on this. I mean, the jobs report on Friday was blockbuster, roaring economy right now. White House aides, they point to consumer sentiment. They say, look, people are starting to feel better. We're going to start seeing this in our poll numbers. That may be. It hasn't happened yet. Americans might be feeling better about the economy. They're not giving Joe Biden any credit.
They're not. And I think it's just like Andrew said, it's those inflation scars. They are deep and they are fresh, and it'll take time for those to heal. I mean, you look at car insurance and homeowners insurance. Those are up 20 and 30% in some cases. And people feel that when they pay those bills all the time. Their wages are up, but there are a lot of other things that are still bothering them. It's interesting because inside the White House, they're very, very careful about not using inflation and saying inflation is getting better. They talk about prices because they know that is what is really bothering people. But they are leaning into these numbers. The economy, by every metric, is doing well. It's the perception, the inflation-scarred perception from consumers that isn't keeping up.
Let's first talk about narrative. The word inflation. All the newscasters are using it. All of us are using the word inflation. Inflation is when prices go up. And prices can go up for several reasons. Real inflation, right? Real natural inflation that occurs is caused by as the raw material increases, as the cost of labor because we give salary increases, etc. increases. Naturally, we get a small bump in the price of products because of this natural sort of good inflation. But what occurred during the pandemic was not inflation. And the mere fact that we continue to just make it seem like inflation, then you can go ahead and somehow seem to blame a president or a Congress, etc., directly for this thing, which isn't so. The reality is what we have is not an inflation rate, but like I mentioned in previous blogs before, a corporate greed rate. A CGR. And that is what we should be calling the rate that we're looking at, we shouldn't be calling it inflation. We should be calling it corporate greed rate, CGR. It's a new narrative that needs to be spoken. It needs to be created. Why those experts that the Democratic Party are paying millions to don't come up with these sort of narratives behooves me. So yes, the American people feel when they go to the grocery store, and yes, their wages, real wages went up relative to inflation, or I should say relative to the CGR, relative to the corporate greed rate, real wages went up. But you still go to the store and all these products. I went to the grocery store, I don't know, go often, and I was like, my God, that's what a bag of chips costs? My God, that's what a piece of bread costs? It's crazy. 2 baguettes at Costco, $5 and change. Look, that is what people are feeling, right? And if you don't make the correlation that the reason they're paying that, don't blame government, but blame the corporation, blame the CGR, corporate greed rate, then of course they're going to blame the person who is in power. And then when you have a liar that will come out and say, I will make life better for you. And remember, the economy was much better under me. The only thing they remember about the economy under Donald Trump is that prices were lower than they were today, because what happened that caused prices to go up? Complete economic mismanagement by the corporate sector. The supply chain problem, corporate greed. The shortage of the spike in oil prices should have never occurred. There was always an oil glut, corporate greed. Not being able to bring supplies over because of the pandemic, well, just-in-time inventory failure, corporate greed. We have to change the narrative. We have to let people know why they're feeling the pain, but you have to take it one step further. What are you going to do, Mr. Government, to solve the problem? You have to hit the corporations, and you have to let it be known that you will hit them. Elect me. I will make sure that they can't steal from you any longer with the CGR, with the corporate greed index, the corporate greed rate. We have to know that we're fighting for you, not in ridiculous terms like we're going to ask them to reduce their prices. Look, they're building semiconductors overseas. We couldn't get semiconductors here because of the pandemic. So prices of cars zoomed up because they can't get enough parts for the cars. So we're helping the private sector build factories in America where they got big profits for leaving America. Now we are investing in America for the corporations to get these semiconductors built here. As you can see, the corporate sector is a big thieving welfare sector. When we pay for the mistakes that they've made, when the interest rates went up, the bank to supposedly cool inflation. No, you wasn't cooling inflation. You're cooling the corporate greed index. That's what you were cleaning up on, the corporate greed index or the corporate greed rate. Folks, Democrats, progressives, you want to win? Start telling the truth. Start telling Americans why we are, or why we had that higher prices, which were caused by the corporate greed index or the corporate greed rate. That's not inflation. It is corporate greed. It's a corporate greed rate. CGR. Remember it. CGR. And anytime somebody says inflation, say CGR. Let's get the narrative right.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.